Your son will die in 72 hours, and there's only one person in the world who can save him." Valentina Carter shouted from the middle of the most expensive hospital suite in New York City, while two security guards tried to drag her out. What she said next shattered 10 years of carefully buried lies. The presidential suite at Harrison Memorial occupied 2,000 square feet on the 23rd floor. $7,000 a day guaranteed not only world-class medical care, but also a panoramic view of Manhattan, imported Italian furniture, and a medical team that included 3 specialists flown in directly from Johns Hopkins. The polished marble floor reflected the tense faces in the room. Doctors in spotless white coats, lawyers in tailored suits, and, at the center of it all, Henry Harrison, the man who had built a $500 million hospital empire. Valentina wore the faded blue uniform of the cleaning staff. Her hands, calloused from years of chemical cleaners, trembled as she resisted the guards. The contrast between her presence and that setting was brutal. A 35-year-old immigrant from Bolivia, hair pulled into a tight bun, worn-out sneakers squeaking against the polished floor, standing up to the most powerful man in private healthcare on the East Coast. "Get this lunatic out of here now!" Henry roared, rising from the leather armchair beside the bed where his 10-year-old son, Theo, was hooked up to 3 different machines. The boy was far too pale, far too thin, dying far too quickly. How did this janitor get past security? Patricia Harrison, Henry's wife, clutched the pearl necklace worth more than Valentina would earn in 5 years. "Call the police. This woman is disturbing our family moment." "My son is dying and she barges in with this circus?" "I know you, Henry," Valentina managed to say before one of the guards covered her mouth. She bit his hand hard, making him yelp and recoil. "That Christmas party 10 years ago, you were drunk, said I was too pretty to be serving drinks. You said other things too." The silence that followed was violent. Everyone in the room, the 3 doctors, the 2 lawyers, the head nurse, even the private secretary typing in the corner, stopped breathing for a few seconds. Henry turned as pale as the 1,000-thread hospital sheet. "I don't know this woman." His voice came out hoarse, forced. "She's delirious. Guards, get her." "Your son needs a kidney transplant," Valentina cut in, her voice gaining strength. "The compatibility you're looking for occurs in 0.001% of the population. You've tested 300 people over 6 months. Not one match." Dr. Samuel Nakamura, the 55-year-old chief physician brought in from Japan, stepped forward. "How do you know those numbers? That information is confidential." Valentina smiled, a bitter smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I've cleaned this suite for 3 years. You talk like I'm invisible. You discuss medical charts, test results, everything right in front of me. You think a janitor can't understand medical terms. This is a violation of privacy." Maurice Blake, Henry's lead attorney, pulled out his phone. "I'll sue you and this hospital for... I have a son." Valentina dropped the bomb calmly. "He's 10 years old, born on September 23rd, 7 months after that Christmas party." Patricia let out a muffled scream. Henry stumbled 3 steps back, nearly tripping over the $30,000 coffee table. "And before you ask," Valentina continued, pulling a crumpled envelope from her uniform pocket, "I paid for the compatibility test myself with money I saved for 3 months. My son, David, is a perfect match for Theo." Dr. Nakamura took the paper with hands that trembled slightly. His eyes scanned the results once, twice, 3 times. "This is extraordinary. The genetic markers are nearly identical. This only happens between..." Brothers, Valentina finished. Brothers with the same father but different mothers. Half-brothers who share 50% of their DNA. The document passed from hand to hand. Each doctor who read it grew paler. It was real. Numbers didn't lie. Theo Harrison's salvation was right there. A 10-year-old boy no one knew existed. Henry tried to speak 3 times before he managed to form words. This is a scam. You forged these tests. You want money, is that it? How much do you want? I want my son to meet his father before saving his brother's life, Valentina replied, locking eyes with him. I want you to look into David's eyes and see your own reflection. I want Patricia to know the kind of man she shared a bed with for 15 years. Mom? Theo's weak voice cut through the argument. The boy had woken up to the shouting. What's happening? Who is this lady? Patricia rushed to her son, shooting a look of pure hatred at Valentina. It's nothing, sweetheart, just a confused employee. An employee who holds the only chance of saving your son, Valentina corrected. 72 hours, remember, that's what Dr. Nakamura said yesterday. After that, his kidneys shut down completely. She's right, Nakamura confirmed, checking the monitors. Renal function is at 8%. We have a very small window. Henry ran his hands through his hair, ruining the $200 styling. Even if this is true, what makes you think I'll agree to your terms? Valentina walked to the window, gazing down at the city. When she turned back, her eyes were dry, but her voice carried 10 years of pain. Because down in the parking lot, 15 reporters are waiting. I called them before coming up. If I don't go down in 30 minutes with a signed agreement, they'll receive an email with everything. Photos, documents, a recording of that night. Recording? Henry nearly shouted. You were too drunk to notice, but that party was celebrating the hospital's new compliance policy. There were cameras everywhere. I have a copy of what happened in that conference room after everyone left. Maurice Blake's phone started ringing insistently. He answered, listened for a few seconds, and grew even paler. Henry, the PR team is panicking. Reporters are saying there's a big revelation about the Harrison family. The hospital's stock has already dropped 3% in the last 10 minutes. Valentina glanced at the wall clock, a giant Rolex that read 2:17 p.m. You have 28 minutes to decide. Accept my terms or watch the Harrison empire collapse live on the evening news. Henry looked at Theo in the hospital bed, at Patricia crying silently, at the doctors waiting for a decision, and finally at Valentina. The cleaning woman he had never really noticed in 3 years was about to either destroy or save his life. And worst of all, she held all the power in that moment. What exactly do you want? He asked, his voice defeated. Valentina smiled again, but this time there was a spark of triumph in her eyes. First, you're going to call my son. You're going to tell him you're his father. Then we'll talk about 10 years of unpaid child support, legal recognition of paternity, and how David is going to save the life of the brother he never knew he had. The clock's relentless ticking filled the silence. 72 hours to save Theo, 27 minutes to save the family's reputation, and 10 years of lies ready to explode like a bomb in the middle of that $7,000 a day suite. The silence in the hospital suite was so dense you could hear the faint hum of the machines keeping Theo alive. Valentina stood motionless while Henry typed something on his phone with trembling fingers. No one dared to speak. It was as if they were all trapped in a time bubble, waiting for the next move that would decide the fate of 2 children and destroy a decade of secrets. I need to understand one thing. Patricia broke the silence, her voice wavering between rage and despair. She rose from Theo's bedside and walked toward Valentina, her $1,200 heels clicking against the floor like warning shots. You worked here for 3 years, cleaned this suite hundreds of times, watched my son waste away day after day, and only now, when he's at death's door, do you show up with this story? Valentina held Patricia's gaze without flinching. It was strange how now, after 10 years in hiding, she felt stronger than ever. I found out about Theo's illness 6 months ago when you got the diagnosis. I spent all that time trying to decide what to do. My son didn't know he had a brother, didn't know who his father was. I built an entire life around protecting him from this man. She pointed at Henry, still frozen with his phone in hand. Let me tell you how it all started, Valentina continued, her voice gaining the rhythm of someone finally able to tell a story buried for far too long. 10 years ago, I wasn't a janitor. I was a temp waitress hired to work at the hospital's corporate Christmas party. I needed the money because I had just arrived from Bolivia. My medical degree meant nothing here, and the revalidation process cost more than I could afford. Dr. Nakamura's eyes widened. You're a doctor? Graduated from Universidad Mayor de San Andres in La Paz. Specialized in pediatrics, but none of that mattered in the U.S. Here I was, just another immigrant trying to survive. Valentina walked back to the window, looking out at the city that had been both cruel and generous to her. That night, the party was to celebrate the hospital's record revenue, $500 million for the first time. French champagne, Russian caviar, only the best for New York's medical elite. Henry finally found his voice. That proves nothing. Plenty of people worked that party. You're right, Valentina agreed, turning to face him. There were 47 temp workers that night, but only one was dragged into the conference room after everyone left. Only one heard you say that women like me should feel honored by the attention of a man like you. Patricia's face drained of color. She looked at her husband as if seeing him for the first time. Henry, what is she talking about? It was 3 a.m, Valentina went on, her voice eerily calm for someone reliving the worst moment of her life. I was putting away the last glasses when you showed up, said you'd been watching me all night, that I was too pretty to be a waitress, that you could get me something better if I was accommodating. That's a lie, Henry exploded, but even his own attorneys thought his protest sounded weak. The night guard, Mr. Charles, still works here, Valentina continued. He found me crying in the women's restroom at 4 a.m. My uniform was torn, bruises on my neck. He wanted to call the police, but I begged him not to. I knew no one would believe an undocumented immigrant over the owner of the hospital. Mrs. Nazareth, the 60-year-old cleaning supervisor who had slipped quietly into the suite to check on the commotion, let out a heavy sigh. She had known Valentina for years and had been her only friend when she discovered the pregnancy. It's true, she said, stunning everyone. I was working that night too. I saw the state Valentina was in. I helped her get a janitorial job 3 months later when she realized she was pregnant. Nazareth, you're fired, Henry growled. Then fire me, the older woman shot back with the courage of someone who had nothing left to lose. After 30 years cleaning your hospital, I can finally say what I think. You ruined the lives of at least 5 women that I know of. Valentina was the only one who managed to hide for this long. Maurice Blake's phone rang again. He answered, listened, and his face turned gray. Henry, Shares are down another 7%. The board is in an emergency meeting. They want an explanation within the hour. Valentina checked the clock again. We still have 15 minutes left on my deadline. I'll finish the story. She sat down for the first time since barging into the suite, choosing the plainest chair, the one furthest from the luxury around her. I found out I was pregnant in February. I was terrified. I had no money, no family in the US, no one. I thought about going back to Bolivia, but how? With what money? Theo, who had been silent this whole time, asked a question that froze every adult in the room. Mom, is this lady saying I have a brother? Patricia hugged her son, tears running down her perfectly made-up face. Sweetheart, it's complicated. The adults need to sort some things out. But if he can save me, why are you fighting? The simple logic of a 10-year-old cut through all the adult complexity like a blade. Valentina looked at Theo for the first time with genuine tenderness. It was impossible to hate that child for what his father had done. Your brother's name is David. He's exactly your age. Loves soccer, video games, and is learning to play the guitar. He doesn't even know he's about to save a life. When I decided to have the baby, she continued, picking up her story again, I needed a plan. Nazareth helped me get the janitorial job. The pay was minimum wage, about $600 a month, but it was better than nothing. I rented a room in a boarding house in Queens, all the way across the city. It took 3 hours to get to work, 3 to get back, 6 hours a day just in transit. Henry finally spoke, his voice carrying something that could almost be mistaken for guilt. Why didn't you ever come to me? You could have asked for help. Valentina laughed, but there was no humor in it. Come to you. The same man who that very night said any employee who got pregnant would be destroyed, who bragged about having connections in every hospital in the city and promised his buddies he'd make sure they'd never work in healthcare again? I heard you saying it while I poured $1,200 whiskey into your glasses and you all laughed about your adventures with the staff. Silence took over the room again, but now it was different. It was the silence of truth being digested, reality imposing itself over years of denial. Outside, the afternoon sun hit the bulletproof windows, casting shifting shadows across Theo's pale face. David was born on September 23rd. Valentina went on, her voice softening as she spoke of her son. 7 pounds, 20 inches long, perfect in every way. I was alone in the public maternity ward. Nazareth was my only visitor. She brought hand-me-down baby clothes from her grandkids and a homemade meal because the hospital food was inedible. For 10 years, I built a life for the two of us. I worked from 5 in the morning until 7 at night, cleaned this luxury hospital during the day, scrubbed private homes on weekends. Every penny saved went to David's education. He goes to a private school on a 50% scholarship. He's top of his class in math and science. He wants to be a doctor, like the mother he thinks gave up medicine for lack of opportunity. Dr. Nakamura, who had been silent while processing everything, made an observation that shifted the entire conversation. Ms. Valentina, the genetic compatibility your son has with Theo is extraordinarily high. That means the transplant has a 98% chance of success. It's practically guaranteed to save his life. I know, Valentina replied. I studied the tests for weeks. Consulted colleagues back in Bolivia over WhatsApp. I know exactly what my son will be donating and the minimal risks involved. That's why I'm here. Not because I forgive this man, but because a child should not pay for the crimes of his father. Henry's phone finally rang. It was the lab confirming the authenticity of the compatibility tests. There was no doubt. David Carter was Theo Harrison's only chance at staying alive. The clock read 2:43 p.m. when Maurice Blake opened his Italian leather briefcase and spread documents across the glass table in the suite. His hands, used to drafting multi-million-dollar contracts, trembled slightly as he organized the papers. In 25 years of practice, he had prepared non-disclosure agreements for all sorts of crises, but never for something like this. Never to legitimize a hidden child while another child lay dying in the same room. "Let's establish the terms clearly," Valentina said, her voice cutting through the charged air like a sharp blade. She had waited 10 years for this moment, rehearsed every word in countless sleepless nights in that Queens boarding house. First, immediate recognition of paternity, no additional tests, no stalling. Henry signs today acknowledging David as his son. Patricia let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. She was seated beside Theo's bed, holding the hand of her son who had fallen asleep again, exhausted by the illness consuming his small body. 15 years of marriage, she murmured, more to herself than to anyone else. 15 years, and I thought I knew the man I shared a bed with. Second point, Valentina continued, ignoring the marital drama unraveling before her. There was too much pain in her own story to have room for Patricia's. Retroactive child support for 10 years. Calculated based on Henry's real wealth, not the income he declares to the IRS. We're talking about $1.5 million deposited in a court-controlled account under David's name. Henry exploded, his face turning red like the emergency signs in the hospital. $1.5 million? That's extortion, taking advantage of a desperate situation. Extortion? Valentina stood, her eyes blazing with a rage that had fermented for a decade. Do you know what it costs to raise a child alone on minimum wage? Do you know how many nights David went to bed hungry because I had to choose between food and rent? How many times he went to school with holes in his shoes because a new pair cost more than I earned in a whole day of work? Mrs. Nazareth, still in the room as a silent witness to years of suffering, added her voice. I saw this young woman faint from hunger 3 times in the locker room. She worked sick, with a fever, because she couldn't afford to miss a day's pay. You people have no idea what real poverty is. Third point, Valentina pressed on, her mental list of demands flowing like a river finally breaking its dam. David will have inheritance rights as a legitimate child, the same share as Theo. No contesting, no legal tricks to invalidate it later. I want it notarized, sealed, and authenticated copies deposited in 3 different banks. Maurice Blake was typing furiously on his laptop, trying to keep up while mentally calculating the legal fallout. Ms. Valentina, some of these demands have to go through court. I can't just... You're the same attorney who got a federal inspection blocked in 2 hours last year. Valentina cut him off. The one who pushed through construction of the new wing on protected land with a single signature. Don't tell me you can't legalize the existence of a child who's already been alive for 10 years. Henry's phone buzzed nonstop on the table. Messages from the board, from PR, from panicked shareholders. Harrison Memorial stock had dropped another 12% in 40 minutes, a fortune evaporating by the minute without resolution. I'll offer $2 million, Henry said suddenly, his voice dripping with desperation masked as authority. $2 million, wired wherever you want, however you want, but with complete confidentiality. You sign an NDA, your son does the transplant, and we all move on with our lives. Valentina laughed, a joyless sound that echoed against the sterile white walls of the suite. $2 million? You think that erases 10 years? You think it buys away David's right to know his father? To know he has a brother? She walked to Theo's bedside, watching the boy who was the mirror image of her own son. Look at him, Henry. Same eyes, same face shape, even the little dimple on the chin. David looks exactly the same. And you want me to hide that from him forever? $4 million. Henry raised the offer, sweat dripping down his temples despite the air conditioning set to 64 degrees. You don't understand. Valentina shook her head. It's not about money. It never was. It's about justice. About David having what is rightfully his. About you finally facing the consequences of your actions. Patricia suddenly stood, her heels snapping against the floor like machine gun fire. She walked over to Henry and without warning slapped him hard across the face. The sound echoed through the suite. $4 million? Is that what our marriage is worth? Our family? Our perfect life facade? Henry touched his reddened cheek, too stunned to react. In 15 years, Patricia had never raised her voice, let alone her hand. She had been the perfect trophy wife, always smiling in society columns, always flawless at charity events. You know what I realized while you bargained like merchants? Patricia continued, her voice shaking with rage that had been buried for far too long. I realized I live with a stranger. How many more are there, Henry? How many other Valentinas are out there? How many other children of yours are growing up without a father? Patricia, please. Henry tried to reach for her, but she recoiled as if he were poison. Mr. Blake, Patricia addressed the attorney, her posture regaining the composure of someone raised to command. I want you to add a clause to the agreement. Immediate divorce with a full division of assets, half of everything. Of the Harrison Empire's $500 million, $250 million are mine. The room exploded into chaos. Henry shouted about prenuptial contracts. Maurice typed frantically trying to find legal loopholes. The doctors whispered among themselves about the emotional stability required for the transplant. In the middle of it all, Valentina remained calm, the eye of the hurricane she herself had created. Silence! Dr. Nakamura's voice sliced through the uproar. The Japanese physician rarely raised his voice, but when he did, everyone listened. You're forgetting we have a child dying. Theo has at most 60 hours before renal failure becomes irreversible. Every minute spent arguing about money is one less minute of life. As if answering his name, Theo opened his eyes again. His voice came out weak but clear enough for everyone to hear. Dad, am I going to die? The simple, direct question of a 10-year-old froze all the adults where they stood. It was easy to get lost in legal and financial disputes, but there, on that hospital bed with 1,000 thread-count sheets lay the only thing that truly mattered, a child fighting for his life. No, son. Henry moved closer to the bed, showing genuine emotion for the first time in hours. You're going to be okay? Dad's going to fix everything. How? Theo asked. That lady said there's a boy who can help me. Is he really my brother? The silence that followed was unlike any before. It was the silence of adults realizing that their lies and secrets affected more than just themselves. 2 innocent children were at the center of that storm, and only the truth could save them. He is, sweetheart, Patricia answered, surprising everyone. You have a brother. His name is David, and he's going to save your life. Valentina watched the scene with eyes that had cried every possible tear over the last 10 years. But there are conditions, she said, her voice regaining its firmness. David is not an organ on a shelf. He's a 10-year-old boy who will wake up tomorrow and learn he has a father and a brother. And you will guarantee he's welcomed into this family with all the respect and rights he deserves. The wall clock read 3:28 p.m. 2 minutes remained before Valentina's deadline expired. Downstairs, journalists waited like vultures, ready to devour the remains of the Harrison family's reputation. "I accept," Henry said at last, his voice defeated like a general signing a surrender. "All the conditions, recognition of paternity, retroactive child support, inheritance rights, everything. But the transplant happens immediately." "And the divorce," Patricia added, her voice as cold as the suite's air conditioning. "I'm not spending another night pretending we're a happy family." Valentina nodded slowly. She had won. But victories like this bring no joy, only relief. "Mr. Blake, prepare the documents. But first, Henry is going to call David. He'll introduce himself as his father, and he will ask humbly that the son he abandoned save the son he raised." Valentina's phone vibrated in her hand as she dialed the number she had guarded for a decade. On the other end, in a modest apartment in Queens, David should have been arriving home from school. It was 3:42 p.m. on a Thursday that would change his life forever. The silence in the hospital suite was so complete that everyone could hear the ringback tone echoing on speaker. Once, twice, 3 times, until a child's voice answered with the carefree joy of someone who doesn't know the world is about to turn upside down. "Hi, Mom. I just got back from school. Ms. Marcia says hi. Oh, and I got 100 on my science test." David's voice overflowed with excitement, and everyone in the room immediately recognized the similarity to Theo's tone before the illness. It was like hearing an echo of the past, a healthy version of the boy now fighting for his life just a few feet away. Valentina closed her eyes for a moment, gathering strength for what she was about to do. "David, sweetheart, I need you to listen carefully. There are some people here with me who need to talk to you. It's important, things I should have told you a long time ago." Her voice trembled slightly, and Mrs. Nazareth placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Mom, are you okay? Are you crying? Did something happen at work?" The instant concern in the boy's voice made Patricia press a hand to her chest. It was exactly how Theo spoke when he sensed she was sad. The same protective tone, the same instinctive care. "I'm okay, honey. But I need you to be strong now. Remember when you asked me about your dad and I said someday I'd tell you the whole truth? That day has come." Valentina held the phone out to Henry, who was frozen like a pillar of salt. "Talk to him," she ordered, her voice allowing no refusal. Henry took the phone with visibly trembling hands. For a few seconds, he only breathed, unable to form words. "How do you introduce yourself to a son whose existence you ignored for 10 years? How do you explain a decade of absence in a phone call?" "Hello? David?" His voice came out hoarse, unrecognizable even to himself. I'm Henry Harrison, your father." The silence on the other end lasted so long that everyone thought the call had dropped. Then, with a maturity a 10-year-old shouldn't possess, David replied, "I always knew you were out there somewhere. My mom never spoke badly about you, but I saw the sadness in her eyes when I asked, 'Why did it take you so long to find me?'" The simple, direct question shattered any defense Henry might have prepared. There was no way to explain without admitting his own cowardice, his own cruelty. I didn't know you existed, David. Your mom, she had reasons not to tell me. I wasn't a good man 10 years ago. Maybe I'm still not, but I'm trying to fix my mistakes." "Are you sick?" David asked, showing a sharp perception that surprised everyone. "My mom only cries like this when someone's really sick. Is that why you're calling me now?" Valentina took the phone back before Henry could answer. "David, you have a brother. A twin in age who's very sick and needs your help. I know it's a lot at once, but we need you here at the hospital as soon as possible." "A brother?" David's voice jumped an octave, mixing amazement with an unexpected joy. "I've always wanted a brother. What's his name? Does he look like me? Why is he sick?" The questions burst out in a volley, an eager mind trying to process a lifetime of secrets revealed in minutes. It was Theo who answered, his voice weak but determined, cutting into the conversation. "My name is Theo. I'm 10 too. And yeah, they say we look a lot alike. Do you like soccer? I'm a New York City FC fan." "Me too," David practically shouted into the phone. "Mom, is it really true? I have a brother, and he roots for New York City FC?" For a moment, in the middle of that family tragedy, two children connected through the simplicity of soccer, as if decades of lies could be erased by a shared love for a team. As the conversation continued, with Valentina carefully explaining the situation to David, chaos erupted outside the suite. The news had fully leaked. Someone on the medical staff, perhaps a nurse with access to social media, had shared fragments of the story. Within minutes, the scandal was everywhere. "Hospital tycoon has secret child with cleaning woman," was the mildest of the headlines popping up on news sites. Maurice Blake was in full-blown panic, juggling 3 different phones as he tried to contain the tsunami of negative press. "Henry, the situation is completely out of control. The New York Times already has the full story. 60 Minutes is sending a crew. Shares are down another 20%. The board is demanding your immediate resignation." "To hell with the board," Henry replied, shocking everyone with his sudden indifference to the empire he had built. He was watching Theo chat excitedly with the brother he had just discovered, seeing his dying son come back to life simply at the prospect of meeting David. "Maurice, prepare my resignation. Patricia can take my seat on the board. She's always been smarter than me anyway." Patricia looked at him with a mix of surprise and something that might be late-arriving respect. "I don't want your empire, Henry. I want my freedom. Sell everything, split the money, donate it to charity. I don't care. I just want to raise Theo far away from all this toxicity." Valentina had stepped into the hallway to keep talking with David in private, calmly explaining that he would need tests, that there might be surgery, that he would be a hero for saving his brother's life. Through the glass door, everyone could see her gesturing, her face shifting between tears and smiles as her son processed the avalanche of revelations. That was when the elevator doors opened and a wave of reporters tried to flood the floor. Hospital security struggled to hold them back, but microphones and cameras thrust toward anyone who looked like they had information. In the middle of the commotion, a small figure managed to slip through unnoticed. David had convinced the neighbor, Mrs. Carmen, to bring him straight in a taxi, spending the piggy bank savings on the ride from Queens to the hospital. When the boy appeared at the suite door, everyone stopped breathing. It was like seeing Theo healthy before the illness consumed his body. The same deep brown eyes, the same wavy hair, the same dimple in the chin when he gave a nervous smile. Even the way he shoved his hands into his pockets when anxious was identical to Theo's. "Hi," David said simply, taking in the luxurious suite with wide eyes. He had never seen so much opulence in one place. His gaze landed on Theo in the hospital bed, and his face lit up. "You're my brother. Wow, Mom was right. We really do look alike. Theo tried to sit up in bed, but he was too weak. "Did you come to save me?" he asked with the brutal sincerity of children. "My mom said you can donate a kidney to me." David moved to the bedside without fear, pulling up a chair to sit next to the brother he'd just discovered. "Of course I'm going to save you. That's what brothers do, right? I saw it in a movie once. Brothers always save each other in the end." He pulled something from his pocket, a worn, faded New York City FC keychain. "I brought this for you, for good luck in the surgery." The simplicity of the gesture shattered the last emotional walls in the room. Patricia was openly crying. Mrs. Nazareth dabbed at her tears with her apron. Even the stoic Dr. Nakamura had to adjust his glasses to hide his emotion. Henry watched his two sons chatting as if they were childhood friends, not two children who had just met. "David." He tried to step closer, but the boy looked at him with disconcerting seriousness. "You're my biological father," David said, choosing each word carefully. "But my mom was both mom and dad to me for 10 years. I'm going to save Theo because he's my brother and he needs me, not because you're our father. Got it?" The brutal maturity of the 10-year-old boy left Henry speechless. It was the same tone Valentina used, the same unshakable dignity, the same refusal to be diminished by circumstance. In 10 years of raising her son alone, she had forged a character that all the money in the world couldn't buy. Dr. Nakamura approached with a clipboard full of forms. "We need to begin preparations immediately. David needs full labs and pre-op work. If everything goes well, we can do the transplant in 12 hours. "Doctor," David asked, showing the same scientific curiosity Theo had always had, "does the kidney grow back? Will I be missing one forever?" Nakamura smiled for the first time since he'd arrived in New York. "You'll have only one kidney, but it will do the work of two just fine. You'll be able to play soccer, run, do everything normally, and you'll be saving your brother's life." As the medical team mobilized for prep, Valentina finally allowed herself to sit. 10 years of secrecy, fear, and obsessive protection had led to this moment. She watched David and Theo chatting excitedly about soccer, video games, school, as if the world around them didn't exist. Two halves of a story that never should have been split, finally coming together. Outside, the media circus swelled. News choppers hovered over the hospital. Protesters for and against the Harrison family crowded the entrance. But inside that $7,000 a day suite, two innocent children were rewriting a story of pain with words of hope, proving that sometimes brotherly love can spark instantly, even after a decade of lies. Operating Room 7 at Harrison Memorial had been prepared as if for a head of state. It was 4:30 a.m. on Friday when David and Theo were wheeled down parallel corridors, their hands brushing in the hallway as if that touch could transfer courage from one to the other. 12 hours had passed since the confrontation in the suite, 12 hours of tests, prep, signatures, tears, and hugs between two brothers who had only just found each other. Valentina walked beside David's gurney, wearing something other than a cleaning uniform for the first time in 10 years. Patricia had insisted on buying her new clothes, a gesture that was part guilt, part solidarity between two women bound by the same man's betrayal. The simple blue dress made Valentina look like the doctor she had always been, not the janitor circumstance had forced her to become. "Mom, will you be here when I wake up?" David asked, trying to hide the natural fear of a child about to go into surgery. His brown eyes, so much like Theo's, searched his mother's face for reassurance, the woman who had been his only safe harbor for a decade. "I'll be right here, sweetheart. And when you wake up, You'll have saved your brother's life. You'll be his hero forever." Valentina kissed his forehead, pouring into that gesture all the strength she'd stored up through years of silent struggle. "Remember what I always tell you? Lambs can be as strong as lions when they're protecting the ones they love." Across the hall, Patricia gripped Theo's hand with desperate force. The boy was sedated but conscious, his eyes glazed by pre-op meds, yet still able to focus on his mother's face. "Mom, David's going to be okay, right? He's not going to die because of me?" The question shattered Patricia's heart into 1,000 pieces. How do you explain to a child that life sometimes demands sacrifices that should never be required? "He's going to be perfect, sweetheart. Both of you will. You'll grow up together. You'll play soccer. You'll be the brothers you were always meant to be." Henry stood at the end of the corridor, a diminished figure who looked nothing like the arrogant tycoon from 48 hours earlier. He had signed every document Valentina demanded, transferred the first installment of retroactive support, publicly acknowledged David's paternity in a humiliating press conference. His $500 million empire was in tatters, but for the first time in decades, he felt something close to a clean conscience. "Mr. Harrison," Dr. Nakamura approached with his surgical team. "We need to take the boys in now. The surgery should last between 8 and 10 hours. It's complex, but the conditions are ideal. Their compatibility is extraordinary." The gurneys began to roll toward the double doors of the OR. In that moment, David stretched his hand out to the father he had just met. "Mr. Henry, will you take care of my mom while I'm asleep? She's going to be worried." The simple, generous gesture from a boy who had every reason to hate him broke Henry's last defenses. Tears ran freely down the face of the man who had built an empire on emotional hardness. "I'll take care of her, David. I promise." The door swung shut, swallowing the two children and leaving behind 3 adults bound by the most unlikely of circumstances. The silence in the VIP waiting room was thick as syrup. Valentina sank into the farthest couch, her body finally yielding to the exhaustion of years spent carrying a secret. Patricia sat on the opposite couch, her fingers drumming nervously on the armrest. Henry remained by the window, watching the city wake below. The first 2 hours passed in absolute silence. Each was lost in private thoughts, private guilt, private fears. It was Patricia who broke the quiet, her voice hoarse from crying. "Valentina, I need to ask your forgiveness." Valentina looked up, surprised. Of everyone in that room, Patricia was the only one with no direct guilt in the tragedy. "Forgiveness for what? You were his victim too?" "Forgiveness for living the life that should have been yours." Patricia stood and moved to sit beside Valentina, 2 feet of Italian leather dividing 2 women who shared more than they wanted to admit. "For 10 years I had the big house, the imported cars, the jewelry, the trips. Meanwhile, you raised his son alone, cleaning the floors I walked on." "You didn't know?" Valentina answered, her voice carrying a generosity that surprised even herself. "And even if you had, you didn't create this. He did." Both women looked toward Henry, still motionless at the window like a pillar of salt. The hours crawled by with the cruel slowness of hospital time. Nurses came in periodically with careful updates. "Everything is proceeding as planned. Vitals are stable. Dr. Nakamura is pleased with the progress." Each report brought temporary relief, followed by renewed anxiety. During the 5th hour of waiting, Morris Blake appeared with a folder of documents. The attorney looked as if he'd aged 10 years in a day. His impeccable suit wrinkled, his eyes sunken from 48 sleepless hours. "Henry, I need your final signature. The transfer of shares to Patricia, the trust for David, the foundation." "Foundation?" Valentina asked, not understanding. Henry finally turned from the window to face her. His voice came out rough, as if he hadn't spoken in hours. "The David and Theo Foundation. $10 million to create a support program for single mothers, especially immigrants, legal aid, medical care, education. So no woman has to go through what you did." The gesture caught Valentina completely off guard. For 10 years, she had painted Henry in her mind as a one-note monster. It was easier that way. Simpler to hate entirely than to admit that even monsters can have moments of humanity. "Why are you doing this?" "Because my 10-year-old son, whom I met yesterday, showed more character in one day than I've shown in 42 years. Henry signed with a steady hand, each signature a step towards some form of redemption. "Because 2 innocent boys are paying for my selfishness, because it's the least I can do." The 7th hour brought the first substantial news. A young nurse, unable to hide her smile, announced, "Dr. Nakamura asked me to tell you the harvest went perfectly. David's kidney is in excellent condition and is already being prepared for Theo's transplant." Relief flooded the room. Valentina collapsed back onto the couch, years of tension leaving her body all at once. Patricia hugged the nurse, smudging the white coat with runny makeup. Even Henry allowed himself a genuine smile, the first in days. The last 3 hours were the longest. The transplant itself was the most delicate part, the moment when Theo's body would accept or reject his brother's gift of life. Every minute felt like an hour, every hour like a day. Valentina and Patricia had abandoned any pretense of distance, now seated side by side, their hands intertwined in mutual support. It was 3:20 p.m. when the OR doors finally opened. Dr. Nakamura emerged, his surgical gown stained, but his face wearing the unmistakable expression of victory. The transplant was a complete success. Both boys are stable and recovering. The kidney began functioning immediately in Theo. It's the best possible outcome. The emotional explosion was instant. Valentina and Patricia embraced, crying and laughing at the same time. Henry dropped to his knees, hands covering his face as he sobbed with relief. Mrs. Nazareth, who had arrived during surgery to support Valentina, began praying aloud, thanking every saint she knew. "When can we see them?" Valentina asked, her voice carrying a mother's urgent need to confirm with her own eyes that her child was okay. "They're going to recovery now. They should wake in about an hour. They can have brief visits, but they need strict rest for the next 72 hours. Nakamura smiled, a rare smile that transformed his usually serious face. "Your boys are warriors. They fought bravely." An hour later, Valentina stood beside David's bed in recovery. Her little hero slept deeply, chest rising and falling rhythmically, a large dressing covering the surgical site. She held his small hand, awed by the courage of a boy who had given up a part of himself to save a brother he barely knew. On the other side of a glass partition, Patricia kept watch over Theo's sleep. The boy already had more color in his face, his vitals finally stable after months of decline. David's kidney was working inside him, filtering toxins, restoring life, forging a biological bond no amount of lies could break. Henry moved between the 2 rooms, unsure where to stand, unsure of his place in this new family configuration. David solved the dilemma when he finally woke, his voice weak but determined as he called out, "Dad?" The simple word spoken for the first time froze everyone. Henry approached carefully, as if a sudden move might break the spell. "I'm here, son." "Is Theo okay?" was David's first concern upon waking. "He's perfect, thanks to you. You saved your brother." David gave a faint smile, then his expression grew far too serious for a child. "Now you have two sons to take care of the right way. Do you promise you'll try?" "I promise," Henry said. And for the first time in decades, he truly meant to keep a promise. The soccer field at the Brooklyn Youth Athletic Club was packed for Saturday's Kids Championship. In the stands, a family configuration impossible to imagine 6 months earlier. Valentina and Patricia sitting side by side, cheering together. They weren't friends, maybe never would be, but they had found mutual respect forged in the fire of shared adversity. On the field, David and Theo played on the same team, their identical number 10 and number 11 jerseys making them impossible to tell apart from a distance. Two identical boys sprinting with the boundless energy of healthy children. David's scar had become a badge of pride, a mark of courage he showed to anyone who asked. Theo had put on weight, his cheeks no longer sunken, his body finally free from the prison of illness. Henry watched from the opposite side of the bleachers, respecting the terms of shared custody. He had sold the hospital, distributed the money as ordered by the court, and now worked as a consultant, earning a tenth of what he once made, but sleeping better than he had in decades. He saw his sons 3 times a week, always supervised, always trying to rebuild bridges he himself had burned. The David and Theo Foundation had already helped 230 families in 6 months. Valentina had finally revalidated her medical degree and worked part-time at the foundation, offering free consultations to immigrant mothers. The other half of her time she devoted to a modest private clinic, earning enough to give David the dignified life she had always dreamed of. The referee blew the final whistle, a 3-2 victory, with David scoring the winning goal and Theo providing the assist. The brothers embraced in the middle of the field, their young voices shouting with joy, completely oblivious to the complexity that had once entangled their lives. To them, they were simply brothers, as if they had always been, as if they were always meant to be. Valentina came down from the stands to hug the boys. David leapt into her arms, covered in sweat and grass, beaming with happiness. "Mom, did you see my goal? Theo gave the perfect pass." "I did, sweetheart. You two played like a real team." Theo approached shyly. In the 6 months since the surgery, he had developed a deep adoration for Valentina, the woman who had sacrificed so much so he could live. "Aunt Val, can I hug you too?" "Of course, darling." Valentina opened her arms, wrapping both boys against her as if she were the center of the universe. And in that moment, on that neighborhood soccer field, she was. Patricia walked over, her divorce finalized, her life rebuilt far from society columns and spotlights. "Valentina, the boys want to have a barbecue to celebrate. Would you and David like to come?" This was their new normal, a careful dance of families intertwined by extraordinary circumstances. It wasn't perfect, maybe never would be, but it was real, honest, built on truth instead of lies. "We'd love to," Valentina replied, watching the boys run toward the locker room, shoving each other and laughing the way only brothers can. Henry approached cautiously, always mindful of the boundaries he had to respect. "Great game, boys. You were incredible." "Thanks, Dad," David answered, the words still sounding strange, but no longer impossible. He was learning to forgive not for his father's sake, but for his own. because carrying hatred was too heavy for an 11-year-old heart. As the group walked toward the parking lot, Valentina looked back one last time. The field was empty now, but she could still see the ghosts of the past, the humiliated janitor, the arrogant millionaire, the betrayed wife, the dying child. All of them had died in that operating room 6 months ago, reborn as something different, something better, something truer. David grabbed her hand, pulling her back to the present. "Come on, Mom! Theo said his mom makes the best barbecue in the world." "Liar!" Theo protested. "I said it was good, not the best in the world." "Yes, you did. You said it." "No, I didn't." Valentina smiled, listening to the brothers bicker over something so wonderfully trivial. After a decade of secrets, lies, and fear, the normalcy of childish arguments was music to her ears. She had spent 10 years cleaning up other people's messes, but in the end, she had also cleaned away the lies that stained all their lives. And if that wasn't poetic justice, it was something even better: redemption.